18 months ago, we planted the first trees to create a forest-like ecosystem full of edible fruits, nuts and even vegetables. It quickly got the attention of small mammals, lizards, birds and tons of insects. But then an early summer surprised us, leaving our young food forest struggling. Since then, a lot has changed. How did we bounce back and what has happened? Things are going actually quite okay. Fruit trees are establishing, pioneering trees are taking over the space, and we're finally starting to create some needed biomass, shade and protection. In this video, I want to tell you everything that we have learned by showing you around our food forest and also tell you about the things that went wrong and how we can improve the situation to create a thriving and abundant ecosystem. To give you a quick backstory of this project, we arrived on this property in central Portugal in March 2022. So it was the end of winter with not much time left to plant trees before the heat of summer would arrive. The soil on this ridge was very rocky and dry, so we decided to build these massive swales to increase the topsoil for our food forests and harvest rainwater to recharge the groundwater and irrigate this young ecosystem. We then planted a bunch of different trees like chestnuts, apples, cherries, lemons, oranges, loquats and pomegranates, to name a few. To ensure they would have enough irrigation to survive the coming hot and dry summer months, we installed a drip irrigation system with water from a 100-year-old hand-dug well. We then mulched the area and sowed a diverse cover crop to revegetate the bare soil. During its first summer, this system was struggling. Temperatures reached up to 48 degrees Celsius and we had no drop of rain for months. There were days when we thought we would lose all the trees we had planted. The swales were looking dead, empty, and the trees were stressed and not too happy. Not really the idealistic image we have in mind when we think of a lush food forest. They should be green and abundant. As summer finally passed, it was time to assess the situation. To our surprise, from the several hundreds of trees that we planted, only about 5% died. The rest of them were still breathing. Not much, but hanging in there. If it wasn't for the basic drip irrigation we had set up, that percentage would have likely been much higher. And that was my mistake. With the resources we had available, we bought many different types of fruit trees and only a few biomass trees, and we spread them out over too large of an area. What we didn't do is plant enough biomass trees to fill in all the gaps and quickly establish a protection for our fruiting trees. I simply thought that it was a better investment to first start the fruit trees and get them established, and then over time keep adding to the system to create the ultimate abundant food forest that we have in mind. Sure, most of the fruit trees did survive, but it wasn't easy for them and they barely grew. It was much like they were stunted. Right now, through this experience and learning it the hard way, I would much rather only focus on biomass and support species in the first year or two, or if there are enough funds available, also directly the fruiting trees and shrubs with them all at the same time. In hindsight, with the budget that we had for this project, we should have started with only one smaller area, so for example our main swale, to make sure we had enough trees and shrubs to fill out the entire area. And only once that system is established, then expand it further onto the land. Now we were left with trees unprotected and not much support from anything around them, other than a little bit of mulch and some ground cover. That is where biomass trees and pioneer support species come into play. These are the hardiest plants that often grow in very exposed areas, poor soils, and can withstand even the toughest of weather extremes. Some of them are nitrogen fixers, whereas others are simply able to put up a lot of new growth quickly to establish a windbreak and protection for the other trees around them. Like this eucalypt tree right behind me. I mean, look at the size of this thing. This was one of the few that we planted at the beginning some 18 months ago, whereas most other trees were planted last winter. In only 18 months, this tree has grown well over 3 meters. Now, you might be thinking, why on earth would you plant a eucalypt tree in your food forest? And it has all got to do with how we manage them. So we've got this huge eucalypt here, and just below it there's a fig tree and a sanguine, which is a red-orange variety, and you can't really see them as they're completely covered by the biomass of the eucalypt. So what we're going to do is I'm going to remove some of the lower branches to free the fruit trees that are below them and give them some more space and light to grow. So let's get started. Now that is a huge difference, and now that we've pruned all the lower branches, we allow for much more space and light to reach our young fruit trees, which now have much more room to grow. And that is the first thing that happens. The second thing that happens is we now have a lot of this biomass, and by laying all this biomass down on the ground, we are essentially mulching the ground, and over time this will be broken down by fungi, and it will actually start to improve our soil, protect the soil, and become a food source for the soil food web. Now the third thing that happens, which is something I read about a while ago, and I'm not exactly sure how this works, but supposedly when you prune trees like this, the affected trees will start to stress out and release a specific growth hormone into the soil. Some of this actually gets released into the surrounding soils, allowing other plants and trees to take it in, helping them to speed up growth. Pretty cool if that's the case. Anyways, it was clear for our system, and after our first summer, that this system lacked a lot of biomass support species and nitrogen fixers to really get this food forest going. So in the upcoming months we're going to add a lot more of them, and we'll replace some of the dead fruit trees with new ones. Unlike the rest of the plantations, here we planted a lot more trees and shrubs much closer to each other, which is ultimately what we should have done everywhere. So we're right now in front of the herb garden and the fire pit area, and I'll just walk you through everything that we've got going on here. Right here we planted most of our fruiting trees at a distance of about 3 meters, and in between those trees we planted our biomass trees and lots of different berry shrubs. What's really cool to see now is the ground cover of watermelon and sweet potato plants that are actually starting to take over. We've got lots of new watermelons coming on the vine, so that's going to be a really nice late harvest. As we continue down this alley, we even have some surprise zucchini plants that ended up in a cover crop mix that are doing really well. We planted all sorts of different trees here. We've got hazelnuts, figs, feijoa, strawberry trees, apples. We've got some citrus here, pomegranates, lots of different berries. I mean, it's a really nice mixture of different shrubs and trees. As the temperatures are going to drop in the upcoming weeks, we've got a whole load of these new Paulownia trees waiting to get into the ground. We actually bought them last year as cuttings, and we rooted them in some compost, and we eventually potted them up into their own individual pots. I'm really excited to see how this system is going to evolve over the next couple of years. There are still little gaps here and there, so we're definitely going to fill out with more shrubs, more perennial vegetables and more biomass species, and then this place is going to create a really nice edible and aesthetically pleasing windbreak right in front of our garden. I have to say, it's really great to have multiple systems with different timelines and slightly different approaches going on at the same time, which allows us to quickly spot the differences in performance, growth rate and mortality rates. I can clearly see that this younger system, although of course it's still only 10 months old and small, it's already looking more promising than the systems that we planted on our swales. And talking about trees, that's really one of the challenges that we face with establishing this food forest. The quantity of trees and plants you need is insane. We're talking about hundreds of trees, canopy trees, sub-canopy, biomass, shrubs. I mean, it's huge and it's simply impossible to buy everything you need. So considering that you need hundreds of them, that adds up really quickly. Nevertheless, one of the best ways for genetic diversity and your wallet is to start your own trees from seed. And that has been pretty challenging for us, simply because we don't have a reliable space where we can start them yet. That's also one of the mistakes I made early on. If I could have started over again, I would have definitely invested in a little nursery setup right from the get-go, so that we could grow the majority of our own plants directly here on site. That is something that I should have prioritized, simply because it's becoming a large part of what we're doing, and we just need so many trees that it's much more feasible to start your own from seeds and cuttings. So far, the systems are doing quite okay. It's still all very young, very fresh, but we are attracting more and more birds, small mammals, insects, and we even started to get some small harvest from the food forest. What started off as a pretty bare landscape is starting to slowly turn into something beautiful. In the upcoming months, we're going to continue to work on the density and plant a lot more diversity, and we are curious to see how this system is going to continue to evolve in the upcoming years. Normally, rain is coming very soon, and in a couple of months we'll do a new update video with how things are going. A big thank you for all of you watching, and I will see you in the next one.